that year was the first year that Lord Jagannath ever wore clothes. Srila Prabhupada told us that we had to make clothes for him, and he drew a little picture. And I remember Shyam Sundar said he was like shocked. He goes, because he was very proud of how careful he painted the deities. He goes, and cover up the paint job. But Yamuna and Harsharani, they immediately came to the grips with the task, making beautiful outfits and turbans.
The very, very first clothing or decoration that was given to Lord Jagannath was, of course, given by Srila Prabhupada. And that wasn't in June of 1968, but that was in December of 1967 when Srila Prabhupada returned from India after recuperation from his heart attack. And Srila Prabhupada came off the plane with his danda. First time we'd seen Srila Prabhupada with his sannyas raj. And hanging off of his sannyas raj was a little saffron pouch. And we thought how curious that was, because we thought that the rod you held in front of you, but Srila Prabhupada had this rod over his shoulder, and the little pouch was on the end. At any rate, we brought him to the Willard Street apartment. So when Srila Prabhupada sat down in the front room, he had his suitcases opened. He had brought gifts for all the ladies. Every lady had a sari. And he brought our temple the first gift of a coconut grater. But in the little bag, he opened it up, unwrapped it, and unfolded it. And inside were 3 silken malas, the kind that you get at a deity store. For the small deities, of course, these are very, very thin, maybe 1/4 of an inch wide. But these malas that Srila Prabhupada bought were a good 1.5 inches thick. But because they were in this little bag, they were all crunched up. and actually quite unattractive looking because they had been a little bit damaged. So naturally we had never seen anything like that. What was it? So Swamiji explained that these were decorations that we could offer to Lord Jagannath. And in fact, Lord Jagannath, we could even make clothes for him. So what kind of clothes would you make? Doesn't he already have clothes on? Isn't that what the painting is? That's on the deity. No, he said that's one kind of painting. You'll find deities will be sometimes painted, sometimes there'll be carving on the deities that will show that it's jewelry or clothing, but no, you can make clothes. So what kind of clothes do you make for a deity like Jagannath? So Prabhupada said, here's what you do. So he said he wears a turban, he wears a shawl, and they wear like little skirt. So then he asked for volunteers who would sew. So Harsharani and Yamuna decided, well, we will volunteer. So for this 1968 Rathayatra, we were working with the builders, and when they gave us the drawing, we had come up with this very, very handsome, already made and pleated series of umbrellas, almost like umbrellas that went around these outpourings of these cupolas in this wonderful bright cloth of saffron and gold. Now Jagannath, Subhadra and Balaram were in red satin, and you can see the pictures of them. We even managed to get some wonderful garlands of fragrant flowers for this, red turbans.
Jayananda planned the car and built the car, and subsequently every year he was known as Mr. Rathayatra. He would not sleep before the festival, and each year it improved the decoration from 1 car to 3. This was the first car that he built. It's so beautiful. This became and has remained a San Francisco tradition. On this day is a special day for Lord Jagannath, and this is acknowledged by the officials of San Francisco.
One very exciting thing about this Rathayatra festival for me was this prayer, Gauranga Balite Habe Pulaka Sharira. This bhajan. This bhajan was the theme, practically, when there wasn't a kirtan going on by one of the disciples. This bhajan was played over a little megaphone system of Prabhupada singing it, and it sometimes played on the cart if somebody wasn't leading, in between kirtans. At the end of the procession, when the cart was at the beach, this bhajan of Prabhupada played for hours and hours, the devotees said. I remember just the short time that I was at the beach, that when the wind would move back and forth, it would catch the sound of this magnificent prayer, and in my mind it's always been the theme of our 1968 Rathayatra festival, of Lord Chaitanya's longing for Krishna. And I remember that when we were at an ocean kirtan one night, at the very end of the prayers, after he said Jaya Tulsi Devi, and he said, all glories to the Pacific Ocean. And we said, Hare Krishna. And he said, all glories to the Pacific Ocean. Hare Krishna, all glories to the Pacific Ocean. And he had his hands raised when he was facing the ocean. And it was the most, I think it was the only time that I can remember Prabhupada adding something other than our classic prayers to the end of kirtan. But it moved us all. We were thinking how liberal Swamiji was, that he was appreciating the place that we were at and the majesty of it.
I was living in the Bay Area at the time, basically as a hippie. But I always had aspirations to understand transcendence. Therefore, I didn't really consider myself a hippie. I considered myself a seeker. And when I heard that there was the Rathayatra festival being held by the Hare Krishna devotees through Golden Gate Park in 1968, I made up my mind to try to get there. And I think I walked the whole way, which is why I ended up being late. So I must have walked several miles, because I came at the end of the festival and I saw Lord Jagannath looking out at the ocean. Now, I had visited the temple a few times, but it was the moment that I saw Lord Jagannath gazing out into the ocean that somehow some eternal quality was sparked. And at that moment I became a devotee.